We have a good deal more people registered than are here at the moment. So I think we might want to wait a couple more minutes to get fully underway. I think we had at least 20 people who were registered. So hopefully we'll get, more than 4. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Megan Zagorski. I'm a librarian here at the C.C. Mellor Library in Edgewood. We are starting to do some cool Zoom programming like this, so I'm very excited that you joined us here today. We are back open for business here at the library as well. We're open every day except Sunday, noon to 6, so you can come on in, browse the stacks, get some cool books, use the computers for up to an hour a day. We're also still doing contactless pickup, so if you've got something on hold and you don't want to come in and say hi, can't say I blame you. But we can set up contactless pickup as well. If you're looking for more cool adult programming like this, subscribe to our online newsletter. You can find that at our website, which is ccmellorlibrary.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We tend to post a lot on there about what's going on. We've got some really cool programs coming up, some of which are selling out really quickly. So hopefully we will get a good turnout for those as well. If you want to find out more about us, the website is the place to go. It looks like we're about 5 minutes after, so we can, I think, go ahead and get started. And if people trickle in, they trickle in.
Okay.
So I will go ahead and introduce our very special guest today, who is Lindsey-Rose Flowers from the 9 Mile Run Watershed Association. Oh man, that's a tough one. And she is here today to tell us a little bit about your new enemy, the Spotted Lanternfly.
Yeah.
So Lindsey, take it away.
Hi everybody. So feel free to call me Rose. It's shorter, it's easier. That's fine. It's very confusing. My hyphenated first name makes everything a little bit more complicated. First of all, hi, welcome to the class. I am going to go ahead and turn off my video just because I'm having some internet issues in my house, so I want to make sure everybody can hear me clearly. That's the most important thing. And then I'll pop on at the end with my video back on for questions after the presentation. So I have about roughly half an hour presentation, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. And so we'll go through that first. And then if you want to either hold your question to the end, that's great. Or if you have something that's really pressing, feel free to type it in the chat box, and Megan will feel free to jump in and let me know if there's something that I need to answer right away.
I do also want to mention before we get started, this is being recorded. So if you are comfortable having your video on, just be aware that if you ask a question, it may pop up and it may be recorded. But feel free to drop a line in the chat, and I will make sure that gets relayed to our host here.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so everybody welcome. So yes, we're going to be talking about the spotted lanternfly today, but I do want to give an overview at the beginning of just invasive species in general, and talk about some of the invasive plants that we encounter in the Western Pennsylvania region. So we'll do that first, and then the second half will be going into detail on the spotted lanternfly. So this picture here is porcelainberry. The leaves are kind of resemble wild grapes, so people sometimes confuse them, but this is a vine called porcelainberry. The berries are just now forming. They're not quite this beautiful, colorful batch yet, but pretty soon you'll be able to see these on a lot of the trails and roadsides around the area, and maybe even your backyard. It is an invasive plant. It takes over. It's beautiful, but it's not the greatest thing to have in our ecosystems. So first of all, I'll give a quick welcome. Then we'll do a brief-ish intro into invasive species, a deep dive into the spotted lanternfly. So first, me. This is a picture of me, my husband, and my son, Kylo. He is 19 months old and full of energy and excitement. I am the community engagement manager for 9 Mile Run, which is a mouthful to say the full thing, so we usually just abbreviate with 9 Mile Run. If you don't know of us, our offices are on Penwood Avenue, right near the library, And we focus on a lot of different things. It keeps to growing, but originally we were founded to sort of help steward the 9 Mile Run stream that's down in Frick Park, and to steward the watershed to help with getting the water cleaner in 9 Mile Run. As you may know, there are a lot of sewer overflows and pollution issues in the stream. So we are slowly but surely hacking away at some of those problems to make it a nicer space for all. So my background, I got my Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies from Oberlin College, and I have a minor in geology there. While I was there, I focused a lot on wastewater treatment and community outreach around environmental issues. So when I landed at 9 Mile Run, I was really happy that I could use those skills in a new way. I then went on to Arizona State and got my Master of Science in Sustainability. And my thesis there focused around community engagement around walkability and sustainability of Central City South Phoenix, which is a very interesting and difficult space for the people who work there and live there. It's a really tricky area. It's actually the highest rate of kidnappings in, I believe, in the United States, at least in the time it was. So it's a really interesting space to work in and to get to know. So as I mentioned, I'm a mama. That's my son, Kai. I am a potter. I would love to be a professional artist at some point in time, but right now that's just not the way the cookie crumbles. I'm a wife. I love being a wife and taking care of my family. And I make a lot of things, be it ceramics or quilts. I also am helping my husband build our house, so that takes up a lot of our time. And I'm also really into food, really good, wholesome food. I love to grow it. I love to cook it. I love to eat it. So invasive species. This here is a picture of a European starling, which is a songbird in the United States that, as you know from the name, originated in Europe, and it is considered invasive. It's very detrimental to crops, and it also has been known to invade other birds' nests and take over their space, which prevents the reproduction of native songbirds. They're very prolific, they're very beautiful, but not so great for our environment. So invasive species, they are non-native. They come in from some other geographic area, and they spread very quickly, be that, you know, as plants, because they have really great reproduction systems such as runners, or they make a lot of seeds. With invasive animals, that could be because they, you know, sometimes take over other nests and use that space. And sometimes there are birds that are actually known to sneak their eggs into other birds' nests so that they don't have to rear their own young, and others will. I believe it's the cowbird. I'm sure there's others. So they cause harm to the environment. Usually that's because they crowd out native species. Many native plants, they bloom very early so that the native plants don't have the light or water or space they need to germinate properly. They also can be bad for human interests, such as agricultural issues and other problems that can happen, such as, let's see, there's the emerald ash borer. That's an invasive pest in the area that you've probably heard of, and they invade ash trees and kill them, and so that's causing a lot of issues for property owners, because these trees are need to be cut down or are falling on their homes and causing damage. They can be plants, they could be animals, they could be insects. It's kind of across the board. But a lot of people wonder how they get here, and there's a lot of different ways. You know, either they were brought over and no one realized how much of an issue they would cause when they got here. One example that I'll talk about a little bit later is mugwort. And mugwort was brought over as a medicinal plant from Europe and has just completely taken over. And I'm sure once you see the picture, you'll recognize it and know that it was there. So another way that it comes is that people use them as decorations. A lot of, like porcelain berry, the first picture that I showed you, that was brought here as an ornamental plant because it is quite beautiful. And how handy that it spreads so easily and so nicely, and you don't have to do very much to take care of it. It just kind of does its own thing. But then it got out of hand. Another way is that people release them into the wild. You may have heard of issues with pythons in Florida. That's a great example of invasive animals that have come via human interaction on purpose. You know, pythons, they are causing huge amounts of issues in Floridian ecosystems, and it can be really interesting to see what happens with that. Also, they hitch rides. This is imported foods, but really it can come on any imported object that comes in across the ocean. So the spotted lanternfly we're talking about, this is how it came into the country. It was a hitchhiker. And I mean, it's hard to, you know, get how many huge shipments in all of our ports every day, you know, to check everything completely thoroughly is very difficult. So these can very easily get into the country accidentally. So here's two pictures of invasive insects that I'm sure you're familiar with. On the left, we have the Asian tiger mosquito, which is kind of the bane of my existence right now. Turns out my son is very allergic to them and gets huge welts, unlike any other insect bite that he will get. So, and they come out during the day. These mosquitoes, that's one reason that they're so successful, is that they come out during the day when a lot of animals and humans are active, and they cause a lot of problems. They are actually the mosquito that carries the Zika virus. While that's not a problem in Pennsylvania, that is the insect that is responsible for it where it is. On the right, we have the brown marmorated stink bug. If you're like me, you find them flying through your house, hitting you in the face at all hours of the day. Brown marmorated stink bugs, they are really interesting because if you see one in your house, there's thousands more hiding somewhere in your attic space, in your walls. They'll kind of take up residence anywhere. If you are interested in the stink bug and want to know more about it, there was a great article in the New Yorker, I think last year or the year before, that you may be able to find somewhere. It was really interesting to read about the life history, natural history of that insect. So invasive plants. I want to focus a bit on invasive plants just because I deal with them so much in my job, working in the park and working in gardens. And also I feel like it's something that homeowners and residents around here, they really feel like they can tackle something. This is it's a very, very visible to them, and they can, you know, you can remove a swath and feel like you really did something that day. Whereas insects, it's kind of hard to, they get away from you sometimes. So plants are great. So invasive plants, again, they grow outside of their native range. And one really key thing with invasive plants is that they have a really large north-south range where they live natively. So a lot of the plants we see from Asia, from China, for example, China's a very large country, and they're able to live in the very cold regions and the warmer regions as well. And when they come to the United States, that means that they can just spread at will. This picture on the right here, this is purple loosestrife. Again, very beautiful, but very prolific on roadsides. You've probably seen it driving around if you go out, especially in the country. Tends to be more along country roadsides that aren't mowed as normally as city roadsides. So that's when you'll likely see. It also likes to be in pretty damp areas. So if there's wetlands around, you might see it there as well. Another key thing about invasive plants is that they don't really have many predators, so not many things eat them. And there's not a lot of insects or diseases that affect them as there would be native plants, just because they haven't evolved together with those pests and predators. They also grow really quickly. You'll often find that the invasive plants are up and happy and healthy far before any native plants would be. Bush honeysuckle, for example, it is one of the first bushes to leaf out in the understory. And if you look around in early spring, if you're seeing green leaves, it's very likely that you're seeing bush honeysuckle. They also have a very aggressive reproduction strategy. So things like Japanese knotweed, and I'll show you some pictures of that later, it can produce millions of seeds just with a couple of plants. So it really does a good job of what it does. And there's vegetative reproduction. So this is runners that go underground. So this is when, when you pull out one plant, and then all of a sudden you're pulling out these roots that go on for 5-10 feet. That is vegetative reproduction, and a lot of the native or invasive plants that we see in the area use this to their advantage, and so it makes it really hard to get rid of, especially because if one of those little pieces breaks off, then a new plant can grow from it pretty quickly. They also, as I mentioned, they physically crowd out other plants, but they also chemically crowd out plants. I'm always mispronounce this, but it's allelopathy, I want to say. So this is when they put out some sort of chemical that will discourage other plants from growing underneath them. One native example of this is the black walnut. It can be kind of difficult to grow other plants under black walnuts because they have a very strong, their fruits are very strong. They also have this chemical they crowd out. But one plant that is really good at this is the Norway maple. That's an invasive type of maple tree. One way to tell if you have a Norway maple in your yard is if you pluck the leaf off the main stem of the branch. There's sort of a white milky substance similar to what you see from milkweed that comes out of the stem, and that will signify to you that you have Norway maple in your yard. And I'm almost positive you do. If you have maple trees, you probably have some Norway maple. So let's just dive in here. I'll give you a couple of examples of some invasive plants that I deal with in my work in the park, and also that you will likely see in your yard that are used a lot in landscaping, and others that are just very prolific. Just to note that this is only skimming the surface of invasive plants. If I wanted to do a slideshow that showed you all the invasive plants of Western Pennsylvania, we'd be here for hours and hours. And I don't know about you, but I would rather, you know, have a little introduction and then, you know, get a taste and do some more research myself than sit here for 3 or 4 hours just listening to someone talk about invasive plants. So this is the Japanese barberry. This is a very common, very popular ornamental shrub.
Lindsay, I think we've lost your audio here. I'm not getting any audio. Is anyone else hearing anything?
You're breaking up.
Okay, you're back. There you go. Okay, I can hear you again now. Sorry about that, guys.
It's possible my husband is using the internet, so if or streaming something. So if you lose me again, let me know, and I'll go tell him to stop. Let's get back to our presentation here. All right, yeah, so if you lose me again, just let me know. It's loading, it's loading. So one thing to note about invasive species is that a lot of these plants, just like I said about barberry, are still sold in nurseries. So you need to be really vigilant when you're shopping for landscaping plants to not purchase these to put in your yard. And if you work with landscapers, be very clear with them that you want native plants in your space. Another really common invasive plant that is still sold widely and planted widely in our area is the Callery Pear. I mean, it's beautiful. That's understandable. It's lovely. It's one of the first bloomers of spring, but it's very invasive. And so again, please don't plant this and put it in your yard. Goutweed. This is also sold in nurseries, also called bishop's weed or snow on the mountain. And it's a really common ground cover because it grows so quickly. And it also has some interesting foliage and interesting flowers. But, you know, please, if you see it, resist. There's other options. Bush honeysuckle. I mentioned this one earlier. It's one of the first plants to bush out in spring. I'm sure you've seen it. It produces these beautiful white flowers. Some people like to suck on them to get the sweet nectar out of the bottom. And then it produces red berries in the fall. If you are ever looking at a shrub and wondering if it's bush honeysuckle, there are some native lookalikes. Mock orange is very similar in appearance to the novice. So be careful it's not a mock orange before you pull it out of your yard or cut it down. One way to tell is that the bark of the trunk is kind of looks like it's in a scratching post for cats, looks like it's been clawed. And then if you break off a piece of a branch, you'll see that there's a hollow core there. You can see that picture in the middle. So bush honeysuckle. This is mugwort. As I mentioned earlier, this was brought over with the European settlers as a medicinal plant, and you may have seen it in tea form, or sometimes people take pills of it. Mugwort has this beautiful silvery back to its leaves, so if you ever are wondering if something is mugwort, that's one easy way to tell. They also will get sort of deep purple maroon stems when they get larger. That'll get very woody and hard. Another thing about mugwort is that you can crush it. You crush the leaves and smell it. It has a very, I think, pleasant herbal smell. So that's another way to tell if you have mugwort in your yard. And this can get pretty tall. I saw some today that was almost as tall as me. So it is good at growing. English ivy, another very common ground cover that is sold widely in nurseries. I mean, I have some in my house that is a houseplant, but I'm very careful not to let it go to seed or produce anything that's going to get outside of my house and go crazy. So it does, a lot of people don't realize it, but it does produce these little black berries. Because it's so popular, a lot of people have this at their house, and it's going to be really hard to tackle because it does just grow completely out of control. So don't feel bad if you can't quite get all of it out of your yard. We understand, and thank you for your effort. Japanese knotweed, I'm almost positive you have seen this if you have left your house or driven anywhere within the last few months. This is another plant that was brought over as an ornamental because it has beautiful flowers. It grows quite nicely. It gets green early, and it's, you know, you don't have to do much maintenance. But then pretty quickly people realized that it goes out of control. A note, honeybees love Japanese knotweed. It's one of their favorite things. So when it flowers, I'm a beekeeper, and we call it a really large nectar flow. So you have to put on extra supers on your hive because the bees will get so much nectar and so much pollen out of these plants to really store it up. But it's pretty tenacious. As you can see up at the top right, it's growing through asphalt, which is no easy task. That's very young knotweed. So if you see something like that popping up in your yard, please rip it out as soon as you see it. This is a very tricky one to remove because it does send out those runners, but it also sends really large roots and systems down. So it'll go down multiple meters into the ground, and they've found runners that are almost the length of a football field from one plant. So you really have to attack it multiple times. One go is not going to do it. You need to do it multiple seasons in a row to make sure that you get it under control. Some people try to manage it with Roundup. We don't recommend using any herbicides. They're very bad because a lot of people don't know how to apply them properly. You may think you're doing what the package says, but often people apply way too much, and that causes a lot of runoff issues. So if you do need to spray any chemicals on your property, please make sure you get someone who's licensed and trained to do so. So a few little best practices with invasive plants. Please plant only native plants or non-invasive plants. We understand there are some non-native plants that you're going to want to put in your yard, but just, you know, do some due diligence, do some research to make sure that you're not putting something invasive into your yard, and replace any invasive plants in your landscaping as you're able to do. To the right here, this is multiflora rose. You've probably seen it. It's very common. It makes these beautiful little red rose hips in the fall that are about the size of a sweet pea, and a lot of people use those for teas because they're really high in vitamin C. But there are native rose varieties that are available that you could put in instead. I don't know what happened with my typing here, but remove these invasive plants as soon as you see them growing. You know, they'll come out pretty early in spring. Some even will sprout out over the winter. There's one called garlic mustard that you'll see year round. It's very tenacious. And also check frequently for regrowth of the plants, because like I said, with the runners, sometimes if you don't get every little bit, then it'll grow back, and you just want to keep maintaining that. And lastly, report your sightings if you're so inclined. There's an app called IMAP Invasives. You can use it on your phone. There's also an online version. And if you're interested in doing that, you can just, I believe it's through the PA Conservancy or the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. You can find that. And if you want the information, get in touch with Megan and she can redirect you to me, and I'll be sure to connect you with Amy Jewett, who is the regional coordinator for that. All right, now to talk about what we all came for, the spotted lanternfly. This is a picture of a spotted lanternfly with its wings open. It's about, you can say like 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch long body. And that's a pretty big insect for our area. We don't see that many large insects. Very beautiful, but again, very invasive and very detrimental to our area. So a little bit of background. They're native to parts of Asia like India, Bangladesh, China. They're actually invasive, considered invasive in Japan and Korea, which I find very interesting because, you know, you think if it's one Asian country, it's native everywhere, but that's not the case. Spotted lanternfly, really not many countries like it. Like I said, invasive in Japan and Korea. Most of North and Central America are within its range. As I mentioned earlier, one of those key things about invasive species is that they have a very large range, and that allows them to really invade, and this insect is no different. We think it arrived in Pennsylvania and the United States in 2012. Pennsylvania was the first place that it arrived in the US, and that was from a contaminated shipment from China that arrived at one of the ports, I believe the Port of Philadelphia, I could be wrong. And then it was first sighted in Berks County in 2014. So from the first sighting, we kind of backtracked to when we think it arrived in the state. Really important to note, while they are large, formidable insects, they don't pose any physical harm to humans. They're not going to sting you, they're not going to bite you. They are relatively gentle giants, at least to humans. So how do they feed? Like many insects, aphids are similar. They have a proboscis that they stick into the plant and suck out the sap. They prefer an invasive tree called the tree of heaven, which is found widely throughout Western Pennsylvania and most of Pennsylvania likely. It looks a lot like a sumac leaf or a walnut leaf, where it's got multiple leaflets coming off of one stem, and you'll probably see it. It produces sort of pink flowers in the spring. I forgot to put I don't think I put a picture in here, but tree of heaven. It'll also feed on over 70 other species of plants. It really doesn't mind. It'll eat almost anything. You can see here there's a huge list of the crops that they will eat, and a couple of things to point out are the grapes, apple, and peaches, because those are really big exports for Pennsylvania. And we also are an exporter of hardwoods, so the fact that they're eating our hardwood trees, like maple, is detrimental as well. They like to feed in swarms. You're probably not just going to see one solitary spotted lanternfly hanging out. You're going to see a lot of them. Here's an example of a swarm of lanternflies on an apple tree. It somehow ended up sideways, but you can see the insects there. There's a lot of them. And I've never seen these in person, and I don't know how I would handle it. I'm not great with large amounts of insects in one place. Here's another picture of a swarm. And this is in somebody's backyard in eastern PA. So they produce this stuff called honeydew. Again, aphids also produce this. It's this very sticky, sugary substance that as it falls below them, on the plants below them, it causes this sticky sort of area. It'll also affect your steps or your car. It's not great. It's really hard to get off, and it can be really damaging to your property. So honeydew also, it gets on the leaves below, and it causes sooty mold to grow. And the mold, once it covers the leaf, starts to rot the leaf. If you can see the brown spots in the leaf to the left there, And it also causes issues with photosynthesis, and often the plants die. So that's the real bane of the spotted lanternfly's existence, is that it produces honeydew and kills plants. Honeydew also attracts things like wasps and other stinging insects to your yard, so we want to prevent those as much as possible. At least I do. I am no friend to hornets or wasps. Well, as much as I love my honeybees, these are not my friends. So how do they travel? They kind of hop around, they fly to nearby trees. You're not going to see large groups of spotted lanternflies flying from one sort of neighborhood to another. They're not like, you know, say locusts or cicadas in that respect. You don't see large groupings of them flying around. They don't have any natural enemies in our area. No one really likes to eat them. And they're really good at hitchhiking. This is how they got to the States in the beginning. They can cling on to vehicles really well. Their little feet are very sticky. They don't mind at all if you're going 80 miles an hour down the turnpike. Not a problem for them. They also lay their egg masses on vehicles. They'll also lay them on plants like the tree of heaven or building materials. So if you have, you know, rocks or cement blocks out in your yard, that is a great place that they would just love to build a little home for their eggs. So here's some pictures. This is the life cycle of a spotted lanternfly. The good news for us is that there's only one generation per year. They don't continuously reproduce throughout the season. So at the end of their sort of adult life, they will lay these egg masses kind of in late fall, early winter. As you can see here, it's kind of, they've got these lovely little eggs that are in these parallel rows, and they cover it up. And I have some more pictures of that to show you. Then they switch into, after they hatch, the early nymph stage, the black and white. They can be as small as a tick, so they're pretty tricky to see. And then they move into this late stage nymph and eventually into adulthood, and they die off in the winter. Here's another great graphic of the life cycle. I always put in two just because people have different ways of visualizing things. So you can see we start off in the winter and slowly go around. But yeah, only one generation per year, which makes control a little bit easier for us. So these are the egg masses. They're laid in September and hatch in, you know, April to May, though the winters have been getting warmer, so that, you know, may be pushed farther back into the winter too. Originally, they look kind of like this grouping on the far right once they're covered. Sometimes you do find them uncovered. Maybe the female got interrupted or didn't feel like it. But they put this gray putty substance on them. As you can see, it blends in really well to the bark, and even better when it starts to crack, like the one on the lower left there. The best time to inspect your property, your vehicles, is winter, because they're there, they're not moving anywhere. It's easy for you to catch them. They're about 1.5 inches long and covered in this putty type substance. But as it ages, it cracks. Just be careful to check all your surfaces carefully, because they blend in really, really well. They have been found often in wheel wells of vehicles, sort of undercarriages. Now, I don't expect you all to go out under your car with a flashlight and hunt for spotted lanternflies. If you want to, that's fine. But, you know, just doing some due diligence is really great. One place to check, like I said, rocks and, you know, cement blocks, because they blend in very nicely there. So nymphs, the first to the third instar, some are really tiny. These are around from April through July. And then they switch into these more brightly colored insects, which I just think are completely beautiful, in July to September. As they get older, they get even prettier. You can see here with their wings closed and then also open. So these aren't going to be hard to miss, especially if they're open. We've got that shock of red there. You can see how it really sticks out from the grapevine it's hanging out on. They're active from July through fall, And again, they don't pose any physical threat to us. You can touch them and you're not going to get injured. Please get up close, squish them. If you see one, you need to make sure you get rid of it ASAP before it can lay any eggs, mate, etc. Some people have used insecticides to limited success. Again, I don't recommend the homeowner do that, especially as at this point they're still doing a lot of research on what is effective and what is not. Another cool thing that they do is called banding, and this is where they put this sticky band around a tree, so it's a sticky side out, and that catches any insects as they move up and down the tree. That's useful for catching insects, but also a lot of scientists use those who are studying insects activities on certain trees as a great way to collect specimens. So this is the most current map of quarantine that I have found, and you can see Allegheny County here. We are in quarantine. So what does that mean? Any vehicle that's moving either inside or between other counties has to have a permit. So that's for commercial vehicles only at this point. They're not making every single citizen get a spotted lanternfly permit, but if you own a business, if you work for a business that has company vehicles, you should look into this program and make sure that you are in compliance. If you have questions about that, let me know. There's some great resources on the Penn State Extension's website, and they have a course there that's free that teaches you how to spot the lanternfly and check your vehicles, and then you get a permit for your company. But yeah, it started out in Berks County, which is on the eastern side, southeastern side of PA, and it has been spreading. So unfortunately, we do have infested areas in Allegheny County. I know the first was in Pitcairn at the rail yard there. They do like to travel on vehicles along the turnpike that you can see kind of as it comes across the state. And also they cling on to a lot of rail cars. So areas next to big railroad lines are a good place to start checking. So the library, you can check around the library. That'd be a great place to have a hunt. Yeah, so a permit is required for anybody who has company vehicles. I am the permit person for 9 Mile Run, so I trained all of our staff, and I also monitor employee participation in the program. So we have logs in the vehicles that I'll be checking periodically to make sure that people are checking their car for spotted lanternfly, and also building materials. So if we're at a nursery, before we take anything off site, we need to do a quick check to make sure that there's no insects clinging onto our materials. And yeah, you can even do this yourself. You can check your plants. I mean, there's not a huge infestation in Allegheny County yet, but eventually there will be, so it's best to start practicing this now. If you find it, please take a picture. If you can, have GPS enabled on your phone, or be able to describe a very close location to where you saw the insect. They'll want that when you report it on the website. And then also you'll want to scrape any eggs you find into a plastic bag and fill it with alcohol or sanitizer, and then put it in another sealed bag and throw them away. Or you can just go to town and smash all the eggs really thoroughly, however you want to do that. And then just kill all the nymphs and adults you find. Lastly, report it to the Department of Agriculture. If you just Google spotted lanternfly Pennsylvania, you should be able to get to the right place. So that's my presentation. Here's my contact info. That's my email and our website if you want to learn more. And how do I get back to, there we go, starting my video again.
So we've got a question in the chat here. Have you seen spotted lanternfly eggs around our area?
I have not spotted any spotted lanternfly yet. Thankfully, I'm really happy. Well, part of me is really excited to see one so I can squish them all and report it. But no, I have not seen any. I haven't seen any yet, which is good news.
And where would we find a map of spotted lanternflies in Allegheny County?
Yeah, so the only one that I have that I've been able to find is that map that I showed you. if I can get back to my other slide. So this is all that I was able to find. It's possible that you could touch base with the Penn State Extension. I know they have a Pittsburgh office, so they may have more detailed information about that. But yeah, the one that I do know was in Pitcairn at the railroad yard there. Yeah.
And they are currently in their little red and black life stage, correct? So that would be what we would be seeing right now?
In between that, and you might be able to see some adults as well. Yeah, but definitely the red nymphs, that's an easy one to spot, but you're getting into adult territory as well.
All right, do we have any other questions for our spotted lanternfly expert here? Looks like we're coming up on it's about 6:45, so we've got another 15 minutes or so before we've got to wrap up here. Okay, how are you combating mosquitoes? We've had a lot of issues in our yard, and we've taken care of all standing water.
Yeah, so great question. Mosquitoes are tricky, especially the Asian tiger mosquito. I've been doing a lot of research on them recently because of my son's allergy condition. And if you're having issues with them in your yard, they're interesting because they prefer man-made areas of water. So, and even like a tablespoon or less, they can reproduce in that. So they don't need much. And they actually, I learned that a lot of people have that sort of corrugated pipe off their gutters because we have disconnects, and they love laying their eggs in those little tiny wells of water there. So, I mean, you're doing a good job. You just have to be adamant. Some people have said that cedar side or cedar spray can be really good. It's a natural way to keep them off your property. But honestly, I just use, it's called picaridin. It's a lower toxicity insecticide, and that's what I use on my son daily because it really does keep them off of him. It lasts for 12 hours. It's nowhere near as bad as DEET. It's actually recommended by the Canadian Health Department for use on children, so I trust them. They have a lot of mosquito issues, and you know, Canada's a pretty thoughtful country in terms of their citizenry. So I recommend that. It's a good option. And I also like it because it doesn't smell at all, and I prefer not to have a toddler rolling all over me that smells like citronella all day. So, yeah, you're doing what you can do, and mosquitoes are hard to control for sure.
We've got a question about any tips on eliminating tree of heaven?
Oh gosh, cut them down. Tree of heaven, it grows anywhere and everywhere. I saw some growing up in the driveway at our office today. It's kind of like knotweed, where it doesn't care if it's concrete, the tiniest little crack, and it'll go. So, I mean, obviously, if they're large trees and you're not comfortable cutting them down yourself, then you can hire an arborist to do that. But you can also just keep an eye on your space for small seedlings. Another note on mosquitoes, I don't know why I didn't mention this earlier, is to encourage bats to come to your yard. You can buy bat boxes. Do some research though before you purchase one, because certain bat boxes are not as good for bats. They have very specific requirements, so it's good to buy them from a good source. And they actually prefer to be hung on a structure versus on a pole or a tree, about 12 feet up in the air. They're like southern facing exposures for the bat house to help keep them warm. But yeah, they just need some open space to be able to swoop in and out, but they will eat a lot of mosquitoes. Not the Asian tiger mosquitoes because they come out during the day, but our native mosquitoes, they will definitely help keep them in check.
Any other questions in the chat here? I've got a quick question myself, actually, in that I have a lot of English ivy growing on my house, and I really like the way it looks. So do you know if there are any other non-invasive plants that you would recommend to kind of get that ground cover look without destroying the environment, which I'd rather not do?
Well, that's the hard thing, is that English ivy, it also will crawl up your house and stay green. It's evergreen. The evergreen aspect's really nice. So if you want it growing up your house, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't know about vining plants. I do know that there are some, it's not native, but it's not invasive. Pachysandra is an option. I believe there's a native version, but most commonly you'll find Japanese Pachysandra in the lawn and garden centers you'll go to. But if you do have specific questions about ground covers, you connect with me and I can get in touch with our plant people at work, because they know way more about that than I do. And also, like, what, depending on sun or shade or wetness, or they will be able to give you way more recommendations than I can. So feel free to shoot me an email.
Well, hey, thank you so much. I think we are just about out of time here. It looks like there aren't any more questions in the chat. So thank you so much, Rose, for coming in and talking to us today. This has been super fun and super informative. And I'm sure everyone is very excited to head out there and squish some bugs. And I'm going to do one last plug.